Hi, folks. We are here at History Matters and So Does Coffee. We're recording a little early, my partner in crime, Matt, and I, because for the next 3 Fridays, I am going to be on the road traveling and thus cannot be here for you. However, given the number of times, and I'm not even going to guess because Carolee isn't here, so I don't have the number, but we've been doing this for so long consecutively, even Christmas and Thanksgiving with substitute episodes that I can't go on a vacation without recording these for you guys. So the idea will be today, which should be a Friday, and the next 2 Fridays, I will have a brief thing to talk about for you that it relates to history and learning about history and the news, as always. And Matt, I just want to thank Matt for beaming in and doing this extra special bonus episode stream
Happy
of History
to.
Matters.
Happy to. This is exciting.
And you don't have
I,
to give the whole speech. Like somehow I want to say, like my partner in crime will say
I,
the game.
I know. I feel like I should say something like germane to the conversation because I say that every week.
So, like the rules of the game are just listen.
just listen and enjoy. Those are the
Enjoy it
rules.
and chat, like chat
And
away.
yes, chat away.
Chat away to
Twitter away.
Twitter away. Well, maybe not Twitter, but at any rate, the community's great. So you guys could talk to each other. Here's like a little happy space for the community to meet.
Mhm.
So, okay. So my thought when I was trying to figure out what I could do that would be brief and modest in size and yet in History Matters grand tradition, relate to both history and the news, I thought of obvious questions that relate to anything, which is who, why, what, where, when, right? All of those W's, they apply to everything. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to pick a few W's and I'm going to find some examples of something that relates to them and use that example to talk about some broader issue. And I should say what I didn't say before is that, of course, since these are substitute episodes, newbie has to be part of them. So newbie is indeed here. Okay, so anyway, 3 W's per episode, 1 W per episode. The one that I want to talk about today is going to sound obvious, and in a sense, that's why I'm going to mention it. And I've talked about this a lot, and I can't even count how many times over the course of the last year plus I have mentioned William Maclay's diary. Right? And I've mentioned William Maclay. He's a senator in the first Congress, in the first Senate from Western Pennsylvania, has this amazing diary. And in it, he talks about all kinds of things like what people whisper, John Adams needs his wig dressed, and what snacks congressmen are eating at their seats. And if he's writing something controversial, he writes it in Latin so that people looking over his shoulder will not be as easily read by them. It's an amazing diary for a historian, which is why I use it all the time. It's just an eyewitness account, which, because it's a diary, one would assume is intended only for William Maclay's eyes. This will come up actually in the third W that we talk about in this stream, that obviously as a historian, when you're interpreting a piece of evidence, a huge question that you need to ask is, who is the intended audience for this? Which might not necessarily be who sees it or has the opportunity to read it, but who is the intended audience? So William Maclay has a diary. I would assume, as would most people, it's private. It's for him. Who else in the world cares what toys he buys his kids? All of that kind of stuff. His dreams, he records some of his dreams in his diary. He makes fun of himself and other people. So I certainly thought it was a diary, but the more I worked with it, the more I realized that, well, two things. Number one, diary doesn't always mean the same thing across time, that people had different relationships with their diaries, used them in different ways. They became sort of private little places where you could retreat in the 19th century. Before that point, a little more amorphous as to what a diary was. So that's one thing, is the obvious historian question, hey, wait a minute, what is a diary anyway, right? And I went to the Oxford English Dictionary and I looked up diary in the late 18th century. I did all of the things a historian does to try and figure out exactly what Maclay is doing here. But in the end, what led me to fully understand what that diary was Maclay himself, because I read, obviously, the diary closely. And he mentions at various points that he will take the diary when he goes home to Pennsylvania. At this point, he's in New York. He's going to take the diary with him. And I can't even remember where in the diary he mentions this, but he's going to take the diary with him. And basically, when people ask him what he's been doing in Congress, the diary. This is what I've been doing. And I can turn to the page and show you. And not only that, but it became clear the more I read that he wafered in or sort of pasted in documents that supported some of the work he was doing in Congress. Maclay's diary is not some secret little eyewitness account intended for no one. It's kind of a mix in that it is personal, it does reflect his personal thoughts, but it also records his actions. And in a way, what he's recording as to what he's doing seems even more sincere if it's mixed in with all of his private observations. So his diary is a kind of public document in some ways, or certainly in the way that he uses it. Sticks it in his saddlebag, rides home to Pennsylvania, and then if needed, whips out the diary to show people what he's doing. I love the fact that my assumption about a private diary was so wrong. I love the fact that he, and I'm sure he's not alone, are using or searching for ways to prove to their constituents what exactly they're doing. And in this case, first Congress, right? In this new weird government in another state. How do I show people that I'm doing what I should be doing and that what I'm doing is good and is properly small r Republican? I know. I'll have a diary. See, Newbie agrees. He started peeping. I don't know if you can hear that, but it makes me ridiculously happy. At any rate, that is the first W that I wanted to talk about, is what. And the larger lesson of that is sometimes asking yourself questions, particularly about the identity or meaning or usefulness of something, whatever that something is, whatever kind of evidence that is, whatever kind of news that is, whatever it is, asking yourself things that seem really obvious, sometimes really reveals things that aren't. And Maclay's diary is, to me, a permanent reminder of that, particularly if you're looking across time. But even now in the news, you might hear someone say something about something and assume you understand the meaning and the context and the creation of it. And if you ask some questions, you might end up seeing something very different. And particularly in the times that we're living in, where truth in news and coming from public figures is sort of drifting to the wayside, it becomes really important to ask a lot of what questions and really determine what it is you're looking at. And as I've said many times before, why is it being written? What do people want from you? Are they trying to get something from you in writing it? Okay, I have no idea how long that is. I have no clock here. So I'm guessing that was like 5 minutes. Matt, you can tell me how long that is. Was that like 5 minutes long?
I really wasn't paying attention. I was just enthralled with what you were saying.
Okay.
I was like, this is great.
That's good. However long it was is how long these will be. But that stuck with me. There were a couple things about working with Maclay's diary that stuck with me, and a big one was my misunderstanding of what a diary was. A second thing that is in the same realm and also is about Maclay, he describes himself in his diary as being this Spartan, dour kind of individual, dressed in a really plain manner. And I took him to be that. And then at some point far into the project, I stumbled across a letter by a young man who met Maclay. He was like, he was dressed in such fine clothes and I was so intimidated. And suddenly I realized Maclay was describing himself as he thinks about himself, not as he was, right? This young guy saw him and was like, wow. And of course he was a gentleman and a senator. That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But I had gotten right sucked into the diary and hadn't thought about that. So not only historians need to ask really obvious questions, but
yeah,
you definitely have to as a historian.
that kind of stuff's it's super helpful, right? Like it is just,
yeah,
like, when you start to think about, oh, well, that's how they think of themselves,
exactly.
And like John Adams comes to mind as somebody that's probably very similarly situated, right? He thinks of himself one way, but
actually he does some things too that he's not thinking necessarily about what they look like, but they're revealing something, and you have to think about it. But no, you're right. But when you realize the thing about Maclay looking, dour, to me, when I realized that, it was sort of like, oh, it's like, of course, like none of us describes ourselves the way we're seen. I just hadn't thought about it before. Adams, the best example of that for Adams is a letter that he wrote to Abigail right around just before the election of 1800, when he's grappling with the fact that he might not win it. And he's talking about, he doesn't use these terms, but it's close, like this dark night of the soul. Here I sit alone, thinking about the fact that I might lose this election. But the way it looks on the letter, he's like writing in normal handwriting. And he's like, I'm sitting here with dark and dire thoughts, but I'm almost reconciled to the fact that Thomas Jefferson will be president of the United States. And his handwriting gets enormous. I really can't think that was on purpose. It's like, you don't look really reconciled, Adams.
Right?
Not
if
to
you're
me.
so okay with it, why are you using all caps?
Exactly. Pretty close. It's so obvious when you look at the letter, and I don't think it was on purpose. So anyway,
that's
noticing things and asking questions, always useful. And sometimes the most obvious questions reveal the most weird, useful, interesting, unexpected answers. So it's part of what I love to do. That's what I love to do, right? That's not obvious at this point. Find evidence and ask interesting questions and uncover new patterns. So anyway, okay. I'm going to stop this W so that I can move on to next week's W. I hope a lot of you are here. I hope you are enjoying this. As always, although we're not having a discourse, we kind of are. So thank you for coming for a halfway discourse. And I hope you will come back next week. I hope you will have a good week, and I will see you soon at the end of August, when Matt, my partner in crime, and I will be back with a new episode, and we'll be like so rested and ready.
Yes.
I don't believe what it's like.
Yes. It will be more than live. It will be, I don't know.
No, I don't either. Superpowered. I don't even know what that means. Anyway, okay. Next week, guys, there will be another W episode next Friday, as always.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.